I want to talk to you about meat. This stuff is a known carcinogen, World Health Organization. Same category as tobacco.
Meat is in the same category as tobacco. Meat is just as likely to give you cancer that tobacco is. Let's break this down a little bit more. In 2015, a subdivision of the World Health Organization, the IARC, this is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, they came together with 22 self-nominated scientists from all over the globe. And their job was to look at all of the data on this subject. Does meat, red meat, both processed like cold cuts, bacon and sausages, and unprocessed red meat like steaks and burgers, do these cause cancer? So they looked at over 800 epidemiological studies to come to their conclusion. And at the end of the day, what they found is that without a doubt, that processed meat, these are known to cause cancer. These are classified as a group 1A carcinogen, as the same as asbestos and smoking. And they also classified unprocessed red meat like steak and burgers as a probable carcinogen. This is a group 2A carcinogen, the same category as glyphosate. Now, looking at this 2015 IARC committee, what isn't told about this story is that they didn't evaluate over 800 studies to come to their conclusion. They tossed out over 800 studies. So they determined their results on just a few studies. In regards to processed red meat, they based their conclusion only on 18 studies. And for unprocessed red meat, they based their conclusions on only 14 studies. And so at the end of the day, these studies are only observational studies. These cannot show cause and effect. Epidemiological studies are basically surveys where you ask people a series of questions, you give them food history questionnaires, and you ask them what they've eaten over the span of time. These can't show that meat or processed, unprocessed meat caused an outcome. It can only show that it's associated with an outcome. And of those 18 studies that they used to show if processed red meat increases your risk of cancer, only 12 of them showed a positive association. 6 of them showed a negative association. And for unprocessed red meat like steaks and burgers, of those 14 studies they used, only 7 showed a positive association. Half of them showed a negative association. Yet at the end of the day, this panel concluded that for every 50 grams of processed meat that you eat, your risk of colon cancer goes up by 18%. That might sound alarming. 50 grams increases your risk of colon cancer by 18%. 50 grams isn't that much. It's just this big. It's maybe about the size of 10 nickels. Now we need to break this down a little bit more so we can understand what this actually means. Now it might surprise you to learn that not all of those panel members of the IARC were in agreement with their decision. In fact, Dr. David Clarfield was one of those panel members in 2015 who was an experimentalist that raised concerns about the quality of the data that they were sifting through. A large percentage of the panel members were epidemiologists, and they were virtually only concerned with the epidemiology. Studies that surveyed a large part of the population, tens of thousands of individuals that looked at the association. Whereas Dr. David Clarfield raised concerns that they were leaving out a lot of randomized controlled trials, experimental based studies that showed a causal or effect relationship. Now, after that decision was made by the review panel in 2015, Dr. David Clarfield actually wrote a review of everything that went on there. And he titled this paper, "What is the Role of Meat in a Healthy Diet?" Now he breaks all this down for us and virtually explains why that this decision was pretty much bullshit. When this committee said that for every 50 grams of processed meat you eat increases your risk of colon cancer by 18%, this 18% is the relative risk number. Now, in the world of epidemiology, for something to be considered a strong association, it needs to be at least a 200% risk. 50 grams increases your risk by 18% is not a strong risk. Now, let's break this down just a little bit more to understand the absolute risk. Now, that 200% risk, it translates to a 2.0, okay? 2.0, that's what it translates to for absolute risk. Well, the 18% that you would get from eating 50 grams of processed meat, this equals a 1.18. And according to Dr. David Clarfield in his work here, he said that, quote, "We can hardly ever be confident about estimates of less than 2.0. And when estimates are much below 2.0, we are simply out of business. Now, in that original video where Dan Buettner said it's in the same category as tobacco,
Same category as tobacco.
so you might be wondering, what is the risk of smoking and cancer? Why are they in the same category? When over 70,000 papers were reviewed on smoking and cancer throughout the past 5 or 6 decades, they found that your risk of getting cancer from smoking is anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000% increase, which translates to about 10.0 to 30.0. This is so much more than 2.0. Remember, anything below 2.0 is no association. Anything above 2.0, the higher it is above 2.0, is a very strong association. Now, going on and breaking down the difference between relative risk versus absolute risk, this is so important because 18% risk from eating 50 grams of processed meat sounds alarming. And this is something that Big Pharma does all the time to make it seem like a drug is working better than another drug, or that your chances of getting ill from taking a drug are a lot less than taking the drug. So here's a very simple example of the difference between relative risk versus absolute risk. Say you have a group of 100 people and you give everybody in that group a vaccine. One person out of those 100 people have a side effect, have an adverse side effect, a negative consequence. Only one person. Now say you give a different group of 100 people a different vaccine, and 2 people in that group get sick or get a side effect. Well, the relative risk would be that 50% more got sick in that second group. One person compared to 2 people. That's twice as much. That's 50% more. Whereas the absolute risk looks at 1 person out of 100 got side effects and 2 people out of 100 got side effects. The difference is meaningless. It's 2 people out of 100. It's 1 person out of 100. Pharmaceutical companies wouldn't put that on a media headline. That just wouldn't look alarming. Oh, 2 people out of 100 had side effects from their drug compared to our drug where only 1 person had a side effect out of 100 people. That's just, it's negligible. But now if they put on a headline, 50% more people had side effects from our competitor's drug compared to our drug, that's going to look like a lot more. That's going to be a more catchy headline. And that's what these drug companies do all the time. And that's what they're doing here in this report by the World Health Organization. Because when Dr. David Clarfield broke this down for us, remember, he was on that panel. He broke this down for us. He said, quote, "The lifetime absolute risk of getting colon cancer in vegetarians is about 4.5 out of 100 people. Your chance of getting colon cancer if you're vegetarian is 4.5 out of 100. He went on to say, in people eating 50 grams of processed meat every day for a lifetime, that risk jumps to 5.3 out of 100 people. That's where that 18% comes from. And that's why anything below that 2.0 is negligible. However, despite this data, the committee still went on to list processed meat as a known carcinogen, when in reality, the data showed the opposite. There was no association at all. But if that's not enough, other researchers have reviewed this work by the World Health Organization. In 2019, the Annals of Internal Medicine, a very prestigious, one of the most prestigious medical journals, reviewed all of the work that the IARC panel went through. They reviewed all their work to its entirety. And they released a 2019 systematic review and meta-analysis of all the data that the IARC panel used. And what they said was, quote, "The magnitude of association between red and processed meat consumption and all-cause mortality and adverse cardiometabolic outcomes is very small, and the evidence is of low certainty." Basically, they said it's bull. You might hear people online say that you're going to increase your risk of cancer by eating meat, processed, unprocessed, but now you understand that the data just isn't there to support it. And as I'm about to talk about, this is confounded by healthy user bias. This is confounded by so many other variables. And why was there even the smidgen of association to begin with? Well, as Dr. David Clarfield says in his study here, as well as a lot of other experts, epidemiology can only look at association. Again, it doesn't look at cause and effect. So it's not taking into account for if the individuals in that study are smoking, if they've exercised or not, if they're eating fruits and vegetables. if they are, what's their past medical history? Are they on medications? It's not taking into account for many other factors in their life. And just to reiterate what Dr. David Clearfield was saying in his review paper, he said, quote, 2 recent large observational studies comparing vegetarians with meat eaters found no increased risk of colon cancer when adjusting for vegetable intake in one study or a variety of factors that included socioeconomic status, physical activity, smoking, and alcohol intake. And he went on to say, and a separate meta-analysis evaluated health factors associated with meat eating and found that those who ate the most meat usually weighed more, were less physically active, and had a history or more of smoking, as well as lower intake of fruits and vegetables. So what this is saying, as long as you're living an otherwise healthy lifestyle, it doesn't matter how much meat you eat. Your risk of cancer doesn't go up. Because when we're eating processed meat, like cold cuts, sausages, bacon, what are we usually eating those things with? We're usually eating them with bagels, refined grains, added sugars like, jelly on our bagels, or muffins, or we're drinking sugar-laden beverages, and we are not physically active anymore. We're working high-stress jobs. People that are doing this are usually getting their processed meats from fast food drive-thrus, from convenience stores, from grocery stores, from gas stations. They are not going out and sourcing a high quality piece of processed meat, just sliced turkey where the only ingredients are turkey, water, and salt, but they're getting it where the animals are probably pumped full of vaccines. The animals were fed an unnatural diet, raised in terrible, filthy living conditions. This is not taken into account when they're doing this data. So what this is saying is if you have a healthy individual that is doing a lot of the things right that we know give us good health, whether that is sleeping right, having low stress, just moving our bodies like walking, running, lifting weights, just moving our bodies on a daily basis, living a low stress lifestyle, avoiding most toxins in our environment, and we're just eating a whole food diet void of seed oils, refined grains, added sugars, alcohol, and maybe we have that occasionally, but if a majority of our diet is coming from real whole foods and we're doing a majority of the things right, there's zero association when we include processed meat and red meat in our diet. If one thing is clear from this conversation, it's that meat is not the problem. It's what meat is eaten with. It's how we live our lives. It's because we've changed our lives in a complete 180 in the past 100 to 150 years. We are living sedentary lives. We are high stress. We're exposed to too many toxins. Tens of thousands of new pollutants are added into our environment every single year. The quality of the meat we're eating is different. Animals are raised in terrible, filthy conditions, pumped full of hormones and vaccines, fed GMO feed that's not their natural diet. We're eating close to 70% of our calories from ultra-processed foods, refined grains, added sugars like high fructose corn syrup, seed oils like canola, corn, sunflower, safflower, soybean. We're doing a lot of unhealthy lifestyle factors. And because meat has been a part of our human history for so long, because we are used to eating a lot of meat, we are now eating that meat while doing all these other unhealthy lifestyle factors. And meat is just associated with the poor health outcomes that have been caused from these unhealthy lifestyle factors. If you want to live a long, healthy life, continue to eat meat in your diet. Red meat, unprocessed red meat is great. Steaks, burgers, just don't eat it with the bun. Just don't eat it with seed oils. Just don't eat it with the Coca-Cola and the sugar-filled drinks. Don't smoke with it. Don't live a sedentary life. Get high quality sleep. Don't work a highly stressful job. It's all these other things that are going along with the meat consumption. The meat consumption has never been shown to be causal of cancer. It's never been shown to be causal of heart disease. It's never been shown to be causal of poor health outcomes. It's only ever had a very, very, very tiny association. And as you learned today, the association was negligible. So if you like this content, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button below. We have a lot of incredible content coming your way very soon. Be sure to send this video out with somebody that you know needs to hear it most, and I'll talk to you next time.